Warm welcome, dear viewers, today in our health television. Don't we all want a wonderful digestion, a healthy gut? Now that we also know that the gut plays such a central role, even can influence our psyche. And there are, of course, many possibilities from stool analyses, gut bacteria, powders and remedies, and what actually works. Is gut rebuilding in itself actually an illusion? I will discuss this today with my guest Alexandra Kotthaus. Look forward to it. Hello, dear Alexandra. Nice that you're here on this topic, which is also very polarizing because we have so many opinions and so many solutions about it. And I always love your very clear view on the topic.
Thank you for saying I have a clear view now. I always have the feeling that all direct questions I'm being asked, I say no, that's not the case. That can also be seen differently. I always feel like I'm never really clear in my answers because I tend to look at things from different perspectives or try to see and consider some things individually. And I also don't like to go with the flow. And not in our scene either, I know that well. And sometimes I also like to be the advocatus diaboli, the devil's advocate. And yes, at some point I realized that people say, yes, I did a gut rebuild and then everything went well, but now I'm gaining weight again or something. And then I eventually noticed that gut rebuild is a totally stupid and misleading term. And then there's this theory that says, yes, the gut cell lives for about 4 weeks, and after 4 weeks, the gut has recovered. So if I do a gut rebuild for 4 weeks, eat healthily, then my gut is like new, and everything is fine again. And where I have to say, nonsense. Most people learn pretty well shortly thereafter that this is not the case, and that it doesn't lead to success. That may have been the case 40 years ago, but even today, it actually isn't anymore. And yes, even if, how should one put it? Somewhere we also say that we do things in a certain order, but ultimately one has to say when one says, aha, first detox and then gut rebuilding or something like that. Others say, no, first gut rebuilding and then detox. Ultimately, a good therapy always goes hand in hand anyway. And what I actually do more is I don't call it gut rebuilding. And sometimes a patient comes in and says, by the way, I have a leaky gut. Then I think, okay, I didn't use that word again. Yes, what is a leaky gut? Or the other way around, who doesn't have one? And we simply live in such a gut-unfriendly environment. You can't just build up your gut and expect it to last. And that's what I actually want to convey. So it's simply an illusion to think, I'll take probiotics for 4 weeks and eat nicely, and then I can continue as before. What was before made me sick. And our entire lifestyle is a frontal attack on our health and our gut flora. And it's not enough to build up the gut or to build it up at a certain point. The term should actually be gut care, and that means permanently.
Now the question arises, all these stool analyses. I had a discussion about that recently where I said, hey, it costs a lot of money to do a stool analysis. It's not cheap. And the therapy, is it really that individual, or do you do something similar with everyone, with L-glutathione, with whatever? Glutamine, L-glutamine, sorry, yes.
Exactly.
And then there's somehow effective micro. So the question is, yes, do I need it? Is it a money-making scheme? Does it make sense? Is there really a bacterium where it is important to recognize where I have to manage individually?
Watch QS24 without commercial breaks on Wikisana and take advantage of the world's unique AI search query. Ask your individual health questions and benefit from exclusive broadcasts.
Overall, you question all of this completely rightly. To my knowledge, we don't have a lab in Switzerland, or at least we're not working with any where we can conduct the analysis. And if we send it from here to Germany, there are horrendous surcharges where I have to ask, what therapeutic consequence does this actually have? And we once had a patient who simply sent the same stool sample to 2 different labs on his own and got 2 different results. Very different results. And then one has to question that.
And it was the same stool?
Yes,
Also an interesting topic.
from the same sample. And that's something anyway. It still lives on a little until it arrives at the lab. Which method does the lab use? Are we now doing a bacterial analysis or a DNA analysis of the bacteria? And where do we simply let the non-existent common sense prevail? Because then I come to the next point. So a leaky gut. So A, who doesn't have it? B, you could also say I can look into the dark field, or at least we can. And I can also just ask the patient. And the fewest patients have a bowel movement that is normal, where one could again insert the question, what actually is a bowel movement that is normal? For that, I would have to time travel, maybe 500 years back. So at least 250, better 300 years before the start of industrialization at least. And find someone who is neither overnourished nor undernourished, because the people who were doing well back then were not infrequently overnourished. And diseases of affluence existed 2,000 years ago already. And then the people who were not really well, they were also frequently undernourished, but at least the plants were still much more nutritious than today. And we had less need for detoxification. But let's say most people don't have an optimal bowel movement during the survey, meaning it's at least not daily and occasionally changes consistency. And whether it's once or 3 times a day certainly depends on the amount of vegetables and fruits consumed and fiber. The more plant-based I eat, the more bowel movements I typically have compared to when I eat more energy-dense foods. And still, most people who have daily bowel movements are still constipated because the feeling of whether you have a complete bowel evacuation is lacking. And many people still have 2 kilograms of stool and are always amazed when they fast how much stool still comes out.
Now the question arises, does such a colon hydrotherapy make sense or not?
No, I also can't give you a blanket answer there. A series, why not, but not in small amounts occasionally. And that is already support. Embedded in a therapy scheme, I don't actually see it as just single therapy. And in a reasonable nutrition scheme. And many fibers also clean the intestines. That is certainly the case as well. But how many people have, for example, nitrosative stress and as a result have intestinal paralysis, or also a paralysis, meaning a relaxation of the upper stomach entrance and therefore acid reflux? So, reflux, heartburn is not necessarily because I have too much acid, but it can be rather the acid is in the wrong place. And then I also end up in the vicious circle. Why do I mostly have that? No, B12 can have other reasons, but it can also be a B12 deficiency. Then an acid inhibitor is prescribed. Then I have an even worse B12 deficiency. And then I have a vicious cycle. And the intestinal paralysis can actually have to do with no stress, so with nitrostress. And it can also have to do with a B12 deficiency. It can also have to do with a magnesium deficiency. Do I have enough potassium? And so different things come together.
To stay on the topic of the gut, there is also this trend of removing biofilm. Does that work? Are there really parasites?
It is definitely very impressive. Wow, things have come out of me. Great. We need this biofilm. It protects us and our good bacteria live in it. And you shouldn't delude yourself into thinking that if I somehow do a 7-day treatment and remove the biofilm, I will feel better afterwards. There are many things that make you feel better in the short term, and then it crashes down again. And many people see that, yes, I did that, I do it again, and at some point the system is blocked. Or intermittent fasting, that's not really my friend either. Or at least not to pour it out like a watering can over everyone. For many, it doesn't work anymore initially, and for some, it only works temporarily. And so there are many things at the moment that bring short-term success, which are trendy. But for good health, I need to stay on track long-term. I like to quote my grandma here, "Child, you can turn and twist as much as you want, the ass always stays at the back." But it's not just about a small cure or something like that. I can raise the whole system to a better level with a cure, but to keep it that way, I have to do something for it. Intestinal care is the key word. Intestinal care, intestinal care, intestinal care. And I build up, and then that's it. And it's not just about picking food or supplements. It's our whole lifestyle. Many people, I actually do too, I have a sedentary job. I get up from time to time and go to the examination table. But mostly I sit and type things into the computer. That's not appropriate. I have gotten used to sitting upright in my desk chair. I sit like this on the edge at the front. It is totally uncomfortable for me to sit in this chair, especially since I'm not the tallest, and I've even put on shoes like yours for the studio to avoid holding my foot like this. And I thought, no, I actually don't like wearing these shoes at all. I really often wear shoes with a flexible sole. And that's the next thing, that my posture also affects my gut influence. But my thoughts also influence my gut flora. My soul, my mental setting influences the gut flora. What I eat is not just about taking probiotics or a few fibers, but my entire nutritional composition has to do with it. And once is simply not enough. I can give myself a good push forward with certain treatments, but I have to stay on the ball these days. We live in a wave salad. There is a study that says certain frequencies that we are exposed to allow E. coli to grow. And that also disturbs my gut flora. And we haven't even finished researching much of our unnatural environment and our foods that look as if they were natural, but aren't anymore.
Yes, of course, there are all these parasite topics. And that's also something where some can get extremely lost in this topic.
Absolutely. It is very difficult to prove that. I must say I don't trust the energetic test. I am aware that certain stool tests cannot detect everything, or blood tests on parasites that may be present. On the other hand, parasites that are really bad usually do cause clear or typical symptoms. And the stuff that some people think is coming out of their intestines is usually not parasites. Rather, those are often fibrous substances that have accumulated with other things and become gall-like.
There used to be worms in children.
Yes, but you can see those. They cause clear symptoms.
Yes, and I think that's the issue why we no longer have those toilets. You know, back in the day.
There was this toilet where at least then, yes, but then it itches at the anus, or you have digestive irregularities, or so in rare cases, it's a parasite that plays a role. That's the next thing. Not every parasite is necessarily a problem, actually. And if I change the environment, then it can. That's one thing. The environment and the microbe. And if I do something for the gut and care for my gut, not just build it up, but also nurture it, then they automatically feel more uncomfortable as well. And if someone now, I know there are various parasite treatments that are being done back and forth, and then people feel better, but what is actually done in these treatments? Yes, the gut is finally emptied and freed from a lot of junk and clutter. And most of that isn't actually parasites.
If some that have caused problems come out, then it's nice. But yes, I always find it difficult with the topic of parasites.
I'm not saying that there aren't any or anything.
Exactly, I believe we lack proper diagnostics.
But now the watering can principle, or when I can't get further, it's a parasite or a candida or a Lyme disease, or if I just treat the person and change the environment, give what's missing, support the organs, support detoxification, and if I do certain things that make the immune system stronger and also the breeding ground for lectins. So I think chronic viral infections play a much larger role than parasites. And if I take away the breeding ground and strengthen the system, then that moves into the background. And if I'm not against giving certain plants or providing them as a cure, but the plants are usually multi-substance mixed. And whether they have worked against certain harmful bacteria or viruses or parasites, we sometimes don't know in hindsight. But since they justify use when they are harmless and also yield a benefit, it's okay. But there are missing proof options, and there is a clear lack of research.
Especially with Toxoplasma gondii, I have the question, I once heard, okay, one can detect it. And if you then consider the vibration, in this case it was more in the direction of LSD. So extreme feelings of happiness arise that this parasite can't endure that vibration at all. We're back to this vacuum space that we probably have in our bodies, where many things also play a role. That perhaps the attitude towards life, or the positive or negative, also contributes to attracting parasitic things. Just like you attract people who are parasitic.
Yes, I do think that's the case. But I have to say, I think or believe that it is that way. On the other hand, one can certainly say that, of course, this kind of... How am I doing? How do I feel? What is my mood? How is my way of thinking? Of course, it also has a massive influence on our immune system and certain hormones, which then also affect whether certain germs feel comfortable or even have a chance when our immune system is fit. But here for Toxoplasma, it is such that it is known, for example, that people who were involved in quite serious car accidents were examined and found to have this germ above average compared to the general population. So they can indeed have an effect on our behavior. Germs, and not just that one, or even our gut bacteria.
How do you know now? So did it come out in the investigation?
Not that our negative thoughts necessarily attract it. Maybe it is the other way around, but, people who are more aggressive or involved in worse car accidents or more aggressive car accidents tend to have Toxoplasma gondii as a germ more often than the normal population.
Okay. It would still be interesting to know whether it came after or before.
As far as I know, it has occurred very closely in time.
Yes, it's already exciting, because we see how quickly the gut reacts when someone is excited.
It's the other thing that the gut reacts very quickly, and that there is a constant change in the gut. So that's why what you have built up once is not, God knows how long, stable. It is a constant change and requires a constant reaction, care and maintenance, especially with our lifestyle.
How would you now implement that directly for the viewer? If you say, okay, summarized as a tip, what does it really mean to well support the gut from A to Z? What could you already do at home?
Nutrition, of course, because in nutrition are the gut care substances and prebiotics, and also the substances that potentially feed the bad gut bacteria. Individually adding fibers maybe or not, or on a phased basis. A probiotic is often not bad, but I don't necessarily give it to every patient. But also relaxation in between, the vagus nerve, which predominantly supplies the abdominal organs. Letting it come into its own, so it's activated in between, and not just that the sympathetic nervous system of activity or in the overactivation stress nerve is too much demanded, but also physical activity, body posture, sports, fascia stretching, all of that is part of it.
Are there specific vegetables or fruit varieties or foods that you would say are really optimal for the gut?
Greens and fruit. You could make a whole show out of that. Is fruit good? And I have the feeling that I can't tolerate fruit, and why that might be. But many people are not even aware that most types of fruit have more fiber than most types of vegetables, exceptions on both sides.
The interesting thing is also that when it comes to fruit, people talk about this hard shell with seeds inside. That means, actually, what I discussed in the interview yesterday, cucumbers and such are all considered fruits. We just categorize them differently, but from a biological standpoint, it is fruit.
So the melon fruits like cucumbers and pumpkins and melons, that's actually all one biological genus. They are really highly good. And totally underestimated. And I would even rate them higher than root vegetables. So crucifers, greens, and pumpkins. Very far up. Very far up.
Yes, then, what do you think about fermented things? They are also hyped, especially sauerkraut, for the gut flora as natural support.
That's nonsense. So during fermentation, histamine is produced. And histamine in nature is actually the recycling decomposition sign. So actually fermentation is decomposition. Any questions?
I know that you turn everything upside down. That's why I'm coming out with everything now.
We don't really know which bacteria are actually responsible for producing lactic acid, because they are not necessarily building bacteria. They can also be decomposing bacteria, because actually it is a histamine. It arises from decomposition processes, also in vinegar. And then in the body, what our body produces is always D-lactic acid. And during fermentation, L-lactic acid can also be formed. So I don't really know what I'm actually producing or eating. And we have histamines are also another thing in itself. It is spreading more and more. So I am increasing my histamine intake, which is becoming less and less sensible to do. And the other thing is a tumor cell also produces L-lactic acid. And that is also a signaling molecule and a protection for the tumor. It has a higher purpose. He doesn't do it just out of necessity, but lactic acid has several functions in this case. And indeed, L and D-lactic acid can cancel each other out. And that's why it's simply not comprehensible. That's such a simplistic way of thinking, so one-to-one. Oh, just like fructose, artificial, is really bad. But it's a fruit preservative, and that's why fruit is bad. And conversely, oh, lactic acid is also produced in our intestines. So fermented things are good. That's just a bit too superficial. It's thought that this has a monocausal way of thinking. In my opinion, you have to be very careful in medicine.
So this hype with all the drinks, kombucha, and so on.
When many women say nowadays, when I say I don't like it that much either, but I forced myself to eat it because I thought it was healthy. No, listen to your impulse. Yes, some say, oh, but it does me good. Then you have to look closer at why they think that. Normally eaten, if I love sauerkraut, then he should just eat it every now and then. But this idea of me eating it every day or that it is particularly healthy is simply not particularly healthy.
How does it look in conclusion? Just briefly, of course, we talked about enemas. There are various options, coffee and garlic and at full moon. You already know me.
All of that serves to care for the intestines. Doing an enema can make sense, but maybe not always. I don't always have to destroy the environment. A patient once didn't want to have any hydrotherapy. He then said, I do not want to work against the direction given by God. I found the sentence somehow beautiful. As I said, in a concept, this can make sense. If someone is chronically constipated, then it's better for the stuff to come out than to keep it inside. But it doesn't necessarily have to be part of a normal routine unless I'm somehow in a detox program. I'm not against it, but maybe not daily for eternity. And as for the coffee, that's total nonsense for me. Why should coffee be healthy? One has to say quite broadly, given what is sold incredibly much worldwide, there could be certain interests behind wanting to convince us that it's healthy. And sensitive people simply feel that caffeine doesn't do them good. So why should a coffee enema be good? Yes, what I'm doing there is that it contains polyphenols and protects against dementia. Yes, there are also opposing studies that say it promotes dementia because it simply leads to chronic dehydration of the brain. And why should it be good to constantly push my adrenal glands? And why should it be better introduced through the intestine than drunk, where I no longer have certain metabolic steps in between that normally occur once it has reached the intestine? Well, it's a different type of coffee that is used for that. Yes, but it still contains caffeine. What does it do to the liver? Compresses it. Does our liver want that? Probably not if I do it this way. It's not feeling well already. Why aren't we nice to our liver and support it? No, we just keep doing more and more and more and more and squeeze it out. I even have people who get cramps in their liver from bitter substances. There's even a point where it has been exceeded.
So if I overdo it with bitter substances, but even if it's from nature, I'm currently eating dandelion stems.
That's often very good too. So that's the thing, there's no black or white.
Don't ruin me my strategy now.
There's really no black or white. But I actually don't have much experience with dandelion leaves. But I have experienced it already. Our livers are suffering.
I thought it was support.
Yes, it is.
But everything that is exaggerated backfires, doesn't it?
No, it's not. Where's that person right now? Or where is their liver right now? That's the question. And I can also start with other greens and fruits.
We'll do another show about the benefits of fruits and bad protein.
Yes, I'm also not looking for that quite so much. But yes, it's going in that direction.
Well then. Yes, good. Now we've got another overview. Thank you very much, dear Alexandra. And I believe we need to touch on the topic of fruits again in the next shows. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Dear viewers, yes, wonderful. Even when our guests are truly of different opinions, I find it really nice that we get a bouquet of information where we can also feel what appeals to me, what fits with me, and my individual daily life. And I wish you all the best in shaping that. Thank you very much for watching. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you for watching Swiss Health Television, QS24. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel up here, because you can also watch all the shows ad-free here, but also subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is also very helpful for us. Here is a selection of shows put together for you that you might also find interesting. All the best.